Some of the academics at Stanford University have released a list of words that they advise people to stop using with some rationale behind it, and a lot of conversation has been generated by this, I think it is safe to say. So we're gonna dive in, and along the way, I wanna make this promise to you, regardless of who you are or what you think about this story, whether you find this list of words to be the worst thing you've ever seen or you agree with literally everything on there, you're gonna hate my take, I'm sure. Every single one of you. So let's get into it. So here are some of the words. This is under the Elimination of Harmful Language Initiative. Okay, began in 2020, it's multiple years that they're doing this. So some words that have drawn particular attention include referring to someone as American. They would prefer US citizen due to the insinuation that the US is the most important country in the Americas, which admittedly there are dozens of countries in. I get that. I think we all know what it's meant when you say that someone is American though, and I get it. And let me say, there's a lot of words on this list, JR. I'm gonna throw out a few and let you respond, but I wanna give my little caveat. So words on the list include things like African American, trigger warning, abusive relationship, and Karen. So we're cutting across a lot of different issue areas. And I wanna say, I don't like talking about this because I generally think people's knee-jerk opposition to ever having to question anything they believe, think, do, or say is needless. I think we can continue to evolve and learn throughout our lives. I think that there are a lot of terms that, thank God, have been replaced over the years. I think there's a lot of words on this list that probably should be replaced. That said, simply because some academics have put it on a list doesn't mean we all have to accept it. It doesn't mean that everyone should agree. It doesn't mean that all academics, even at Stanford, agree. It doesn't mean that all people in the groups whose words are being talked about here agree. And so we as a society need to weigh in. And so I think there are some slam dunk changes that need to be made in this list. I think there are some that we can have a debate about, and I think that there are some that are super stupid. So again, all of you get ready to hate me. But that said, JR, I threw out a bunch of words there. What do you think?
Some of those were offensive words, John. No, I'm looking forward to your approach to this list because I figured where you'd be on this once you didn't tease that folks may not like your approach, but that's fine. There's always gray area, there's nuance to this type of stuff. And that's honestly the way this is gonna be. And the best way to figure it out, because there's been plenty of terms that I used to use or then I changed and I realized, oh, am I behind on that? Not because I'm trying to keep up with a trend, but because of the people affected by it, how is it that affects their lives? That has to start with the first point of, we know how language can lead to damaging activity and actions and behavior from other folks. That's the basis for why you think about this. And then maybe we can adjudicate this easier.
Yeah.
As you continue.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, there are obviously some words that are not worth using. I don't think that should be controversial. Then there are others where I think you have to weigh the good and the bad. So if you say don't use Karen anymore, I'm not gonna pretend that I don't understand why some people might not like that. Some of them might be named Karen, by the way. I get that. But that said, the pro is maybe with that word now having a meaning, we can fight back against it a little bit. Like, I think you kind of have to weigh those things. Getting rid of things like trigger warning, I'm assuming that's related to guns or something, but we're just getting people used to the concept of a trigger warning. We're already dispensing the word that describes it. Getting rid of African American. Look, I understand that in some contexts, African American as a designator can literally be inaccurate. And I'm fine with whatever words anybody wants to use for their own particular group. I don't know if that's who the academics in Stanford were that are making this determination, but I don't know. What do you think about all of those?
Yeah, when it comes to, well, I guess we'll start with African American. That was still in my head here. Because the purpose for why people changed that, I feel like I started hearing that difference much more in the 90s, was to acknowledge where folks' lineage came from. You're not just a Black American, or there was too many other negative terms that were associated with Black folks in this country. So it was African American because there's some kind of standard for, this is my lineage, this is where I come from, I'm an American, but this is who I am, right? But it's inaccurate. And again, you can change the language of these things. And as people discover, like, yeah, that doesn't really make much sense. Because I remember I was in college, I had a friend who was from an African country, and he said, yeah, you African Americans here, You guys don't know, well, many of you guys, it's a very general term, but many of you guys don't know anything about where you're from. And maybe that's not necessarily many of our decisions and our choices, but that's just who it is. We're Americans. We're much different than the folks currently that live and preside where many of us are from. So this didn't make a lot of sense. And sometimes it could be offensive to folks who are from those African countries. Like, yo, yes, same background, but my experience, my culture, the things I grew up seeing and doing are much different than you. It's a different type of person. So there's that. And also the Karen goes back to the first thought I had. Is this harming people? I don't know. You guys let me know. Are there people out there when they go, you're a Karen, and now there's people attacking women named Karen, or attacking women that like to call for the manager because the cheese wasn't on the sandwich, and they start throwing it in Burger King workers' faces and screaming and all that stuff that happens. Is that harmful?
I sort of get that one, and I'm willing to say, give us like one more year, and then I'll move on. Can we compromise? I get it if that's your name. John used to be a negative term at one point. That was a rough period for the Johns of both types. Okay, and so by the way, again, like there is a spectrum here. So they have on their list the term Indian giver. Yeah, let's stop using that.
I thought that was.
Can we all agree?
Gone.
Let's not use. Oh, I don't think we do, but I get it. Okay. And then there's other words that apply to certain populations. So for instance, they say don't use the word addicted because it trivializes the experience of people who deal with substance abuse issues. So that's the sort of one where I would say, okay, I want people in that community to tell me if you agree. If you struggle with substance abuse issues, I want to know what the general reaction from people in that community is. Do you believe that it trivializes it? If you do, and if it hurts your feelings, then yeah, I'll change it. But it's also confusing when they then suggest use the word hooked instead. How does hooked not trivialize it more than addicted? And to use the word devoted instead, that's, what are you talking? You're devoted to a religion. That sounds even weirder. That seems to trivialize it more. Again, I'm not saying I know here. I'm not saying that you should go with what I say, but I don't know. Some of these I feel like I'm not sure. And then there's things where, again, it's an open question. So they say don't use preferred pronouns, use pronouns, because when you say preferred pronouns, it makes it seem as if it's a preference. I get what you're saying. It isn't just a preference, but it is also at the same time a preference. Like it's literally true. Again, it's up to the group. It's not up to me at the end of the day. I'll do whatever people want, but I don't know. Some of these just, they feel kind of needless. They feel like too much. Like they say don't use the term half-breed. Checkmate, you got it. Don't use the term half-breed. But then you throw that with addicted, and it's like, it's too many different things. Some of these are so obvious. And some, I don't know.
All of these slam dunk ones that you've mentioned, I feel like most folks that think about this stuff have moved on from. And also, and by the way, the one last thing on this, if someone then corrects you or says, hey, these are my pronouns, even when you have a disagreement with pronoun stuff, any of that stuff, if someone corrects you and says, hey, don't use that term because of this, there's this one thing you can do. Listen, consider, rather than going, how dare you? Because what's their objective? Their objective is to probably lower the level of hatred, violence, vitriolic things that are said and done towards people. Consider that before you start shunning what they're saying. That's all, just consider, have a conversation.
I agree. Yeah, 100%. I think that is the only reasonable way for this to work. Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.